The thing standing in the corner of your room right now is not from another planet. It has been there since the moment you sat down, occupying the exact same coordinates in space as your bookshelf or your desk, yet existing entirely out of your reach. We have spent decades scouring the stars for radio signals and metallic disks, looking across the vast, cold vacuum of the universe for a neighbor. But the latest theories suggest we have been looking in the wrong direction. We have been looking out when we should have been looking through. There is a growing realization among researchers that the visitors we encounter are not travelers of distance, but travelers of density. They are not from the Andromeda galaxy or a distant star system. They are from here, sharing our world like a different frequency on the same radio dial, separated only by a thin, invisible membrane of perception. For years, the narrative of the extraterrestrial was simple. They came from the sky in craft of nuts and bolts, crossing the light years to study us. But this explanation has always been riddled with holes. Why do these objects appear and disappear instantly? Why do they seem to defy the very laws of inertia and gravity that govern our physical world? Perhaps it is because they do not belong to our physical world at all. A sheet of paper serves as the perfect illustration. If a two-dimensional being lived on that surface, its entire reality would be the length and the width of the page. If a finger were to poke through that paper, the two-dimensional being would only see a circle suddenly appear out of nowhere, change size, and then vanish. It would have no concept of a finger, a hand, or a human standing in a three-dimensional room. To that being, such an intrusion would appear as a god or a ghost, appearing by magic and departing into a void it cannot even imagine. We are that two-dimensional being. Our reality is a three-dimensional slice of a much larger, multi-layered cake. Scientists now theorize that there could be at least 10 or 11 dimensions existing simultaneously, folded so tightly that we cannot perceive them. These other realms are not far away in space. They are right here, overlapping with our coffee shops, our bedrooms, and our city streets. The entities reported in thousands of encounters might simply be inhabitants of these higher planes, briefly dipping into our reality like a finger poking through paper. This would explain why they are often described as shimmering, translucent, or capable of moving through solid walls. They aren't breaking our laws of physics. They are simply following a set of laws that we haven't learned to read yet. There is a particular kind of silence that occurs just before something inexplicable happens. Witnesses often describe a heavy, pressurized stillness where the sounds of birds, wind, and traffic suddenly vanish. In these moments, it is as if the fabric of our dimension is thinning. It is as if the two frequencies are beginning to blur. This suggests that the barrier between us and them is not a physical wall, but a perceptual one. When the conditions are right, perhaps through fluctuations in electromagnetic fields or shifts in the observer's own state of consciousness, the veil lifts. We see the things that are always there. We catch a glimpse of the architecture that exists in the spaces between our atoms. If this theory holds weight, it changes the nature of the alien entirely. They are not visitors, they are co-inhabitants. This is the hypothesis that suggests these entities have been with us throughout history, wearing different masks to fit the culture of the time. In the past, we called them spirits, fairies, or demons. Today, we call them gray aliens, or pilots of unidentified craft. But the core behavior remains the same. They appear suddenly. They manipulate our perception of time, and they vanish back into the unseen. They are the permanent residents of the hidden rooms of our world, watching us from a vantage point that we cannot even point toward. Consider the way we interact with a shadow. A shadow is a two-dimensional projection of a three-dimensional object. You can move your hand and change the shape of the shadow, but the shadow can never understand the hand that creates it. If we are the shadows of a higher dimensional reality, then our entire lives are being influenced by forces we cannot see. The strange coincidences, the sudden chills, the feeling of being watched in an empty house. These might not be products of a vivid imagination. They could be the ripples caused by something moving in a dimension just a fraction of a millimeter away from our own. We are like fish in a pond, unaware of the birds flying above the surface, only seeing the occasional splash when they dive in to feed. The most unsettling aspect of this theory is the question of intent. If they are from light years away, their presence is a mission, a journey with a beginning and an end. But if they are interdimensional, they are always here. They have seen every empire rise and fall. They have been present for every private moment of human history, standing in the gaps of our vision. Some researchers suggest that these entities are psychophysical in nature, meaning they can interact with both the physical world and the human mind simultaneously. This would explain why so many encounters feel like a dream or a hallucination, yet leave behind physical traces like radiation or disturbed soil. They are operating on a level where the boundary between thought and matter doesn't exist. Modern physics is beginning to catch up with these ancient fears. The concept of the brain world in string theory suggests that our universe is a three-dimensional membrane floating in a higher dimensional bulk. There could be other membranes just a tiny distance away, containing other worlds with their own versions of life. Occasionally, these membranes might touch or rub against one another, creating a leakage of energy or information. This leakage is what we perceive as the paranormal. It is the static between two radio stations. When we see a craft that moves with impossible speed, we might simply be seeing the projection of an object moving at a constant speed in a higher dimension. To us, it looks like a miracle. To them, it is just a straight line. This shifts the focus of our search for answers. We are no longer looking for propulsion systems that can cross the stars. Instead, we are looking for the keys to perception. Some believe that the human brain acts as a filter, specifically designed to tune out these other dimensions so that we can focus on survival in our own. If we saw everything that was actually happening around us at all times, we wouldn't be able to function. Our ancestors who saw the ghosts in the trees didn't survive as well as the ones who focused on the tiger in the grass. We are the descendants of the filtered. But that filter is not perfect. Sometimes it glitches. Sometimes the things on the other side find a way to reach through. The accounts of those who have had these encounters often share a terrifying commonality: the feeling of being known. It is not just that they see an entity, it is that the entity seems to have access to their thoughts, their memories, and their deepest fears. In an interdimensional model, this makes perfect sense. If you are looking down at a two-dimensional map, you can see every part of that map at once. The inside of the houses, the secrets hidden in the alleys. From a higher dimension, our three-dimensional bodies are completely transparent. There is no such thing as inside or hidden to an entity that can see along a fourth or fifth axis. They don't need to speak to us. They are already part of the fabric that makes up our consciousness. This brings us to a dark realization about our place in the hierarchy of existence. We have long considered ourselves the apex of our world, the masters of all we survey. But if we are merely the residents of a lower dimension, we are essentially living in a glass cage. We are on display for beings who can step in and out of our reality at will, while we remain trapped in our linear flow of time and our three directions of movement. The threat they pose isn't necessarily one of invasion or destruction, but one of total observation. How do you protect yourself from a neighbor who can walk through your thoughts as easily as you walk through a doorway? As we continue to develop technology that can peer into the quantum realm, we are finding that the world is much less solid than we once believed. Particles can be in two places at once. They can be entangled across vast distances. They can disappear and reappear. This is the language of the interdimensional. It is a hint that the visitors have been using the back doors of reality while we have been staring at the front gate. The craft we see in the sky might not be vehicles at all, but rather the cross-sections of higher dimensional shapes entering our space. They are the shadows on the wall of the cave, and we are only now starting to turn our heads to see what is casting them. The theory of interdimensional beings also explains the sheer variety of what people report. If we were being visited by a single species from a single planet, we would expect a certain consistency. Instead, we see a chaotic menagerie of forms, small gray figures, tall luminous beings, shadow people, and mechanical-looking orbs. In an interdimensional framework, this makes sense. The other side isn't just one place. It could be an infinite number of realms, each with its own inhabitants, all pressing against the edges of our reality. Our world is a crossroads. We are the intersection where 1,000 different dimensions meet, and we are the only ones who don't realize where we are standing. Think about the way light refracts through a prism. A single beam of white light contains a hidden rainbow of colors that only becomes visible when it passes through the right medium. Our reality might be that white light, and certain windows in space-time, places known for high strangeness, might be the prisms. In these areas, the dimensions bleed into one another, and the things that are usually invisible become solid enough to touch. People who wander into these places often describe time losing its meaning, or the landscape shifting into something unrecognizable. They haven't traveled anywhere in space. They have simply slipped between the layers of the cake. We must ask ourselves why the official narrative has remained so focused on outer space for so long. Is it because the truth of interdimensional life is too difficult to manage? An alien from Mars is a distant problem, a matter of defense and diplomacy. But an inhabitant of a parallel dimension is an intimate problem. It means we have no privacy. It means the very walls of our homes are an illusion. It means that the others are not coming. They are already here. They have always been here. And they aren't waiting for a signal from a radio telescope to make their presence known. They make their presence known every time you feel a sudden, inexplicable draft in a sealed room, or when you see something move in the mirror that wasn't you. The mystery of these entities is not a puzzle to be solved with more telescopes or better cameras. It is a puzzle of perspective. We are limited by our biology, tuned to a very specific and narrow band of existence. But as our understanding of physics deepens, the walls of our three-dimensional prison are beginning to look more like glass. We are starting to see the shapes moving on the other side. We are starting to realize that the universe is not an empty void, but a crowded, buzzing hive of activity, most of which we are completely blind to. In the end, the most shocking thing about the interdimensional theory isn't that they exist. It's that we have managed to ignore them for so long. We have built our entire civilization on the assumption that we are alone in our space, when in reality, we might be the last ones to the party. The next time you feel a shiver down your spine for no reason, or the next time you see a flicker out of the corner of your eye that vanishes when you look directly at it, don't tell yourself it was just the wind or a trick of the light. Consider the possibility that for a brief, fleeting second, your frequency matched theirs. Consider the possibility that you weren't looking at a ghost or an alien. You were just looking at a neighbor who has been watching you since the day you were born, waiting for you to finally notice the world that exists right in front of your face. The silence of the universe is not because there is no one out there. The silence is because they are right here, standing so close to us that we can't even see them. They are in the static of your phone, the blur in your photographs, and the gaps in your memory. We are not being visited, we are being occupied. And as the veil continues to thin, the question is no longer when they will arrive, but how much longer we can pretend they aren't already standing right behind us. The distance between us and the unknown isn't measured in miles, but in the thickness of a thought. And that distance is closing every single day. Every ancient culture had its own name for these residents. They were the dwellers in the mist, the observers from the void, and the architects of the unseen. We dismiss these stories as primitive superstitions, confident in our modern instruments and our grasp of the material world. But the material world is only the surface of a deep and turbulent ocean. We have been sailing on the top inch of water, thinking we understood the sea, while gargantuan shapes move in the depths beneath our hull. The entities we encounter are simply surfacing for air. When we look at the history of human consciousness, we see a pattern of widening circles. We once thought the Earth was the center of everything. Then we thought the sun was the center. Then we realized we were on the edge of a vast galaxy, which itself was just one of billions. Every time we thought we had found the boundaries of reality, the universe showed us that we were living in a tiny box. The interdimensional theory is the final box to be opened. It is the realization that the universe is not just wide, but deep. It is the understanding that there is no such thing as an empty room. The technology of the future will likely not be focused on faster engines, but on shifting the phase of our matter. If we can learn to tune our atoms to the frequency of the neighbors, the stars will no longer be millions of miles away. They will be through the next doorway. But as we reach out to touch them, we must realize that they have been reaching out to touch us for eternity. The encounters reported by thousands are not accidents. They are interactions with a reality that is far more complex and far more crowded than we ever dared to imagine. As you finish these words, take a moment to look around you. Don't look at the objects, but look at the space between the objects. Look at the shadows under your chair and the darkness in the hallway. Physics tells us that atoms are 99% empty space. In that emptiness, there is room for entire worlds. There is room for the things that do not need to hide because we lack the eyes to see them. You are never alone. You have never been alone. The silence in the room isn't an absence of sound. It's just a sound you haven't learned how to hear yet. And the neighbor in the corner is still there, waiting for the day the glass finally breaks.